Think you know Maul? Well, what if I told you out of his 6 minutes of screen time in The Phantom Menace, Darth Maul doesn't blink once until this moment right here. Okay, well, technically he blinks like 3 times, but what about that time we got to see a full potential light side Maul in a vision of his, or even the disturbing early versions of Maul almost used for the movie? This is just a piece of this guy's expansive content that I'll be taking you through, including the backstory behind how he got those tattoos, his childhood and training with Palpatine, and what made him stop using the sacred Mandalorian darksaber he won fair and square. Starting off with Jedi Maul, in the canon comic Age of Republic Darth Maul, we find Darth Sidious taking Maul to Malachor in order to expand his Sith training. There, Darth Maul breathed the ashes of a long dead Sith Lord, which gave him a Force vision. So basically, Maul snorts some special Sith for a trip to truly understand what it means to have the high ground. Before this, Sidious tells Maul, with images to accompany, that long ago this was the planet he first learned of the treachery of the Jedi on and how they killed all of the Sith there. Then, once Maul snorts all of the ashes per the command of Palpatine, he is transported to this site of a young Zabrak boy asking him for help as the village is being attacked by some sort of beast. However, something is wrong. Not only why would Maul help an NPC like this in the first place, but also he's wearing tan Jedi robes and the Zabrak from the village addresses him as Master Jedi, much to the shock of Maul. And the boy pleads for him to help his family, and Maul won't do it for any reasons other than to hunt something. The vision transitions to him eating at the supper table, enjoying food with these peaceful Zabraks. But once they keep mentioning him to be a Jedi, Maul finally has had enough, and then with his double-bladed lightsaber decapitates each and every one of them before his saber turns back to a familiar crimson shade. Killing the last Zabrak at the table, Maul answers his desperate question of why, and Maul responds with, because this is what the Jedi are, a lie told to a desperate galaxy. And then he brings his saber staff, now of course red, into his chest, also stating that the Jedi must end and he will be the one to do it. Maul, hate to break it to you, but that was sadly not the truth at all. He's then surrounded by multiple more Jedi with purple, green, blue, and yellow sabers, with many being cross guards from a different era who he gets ready to fight, but it's interrupted by his master who asks, of course, what he has learned from this vision. Darth Maul tells him how he learned that while rage fuels the Sith, it won't be enough to bring down the Jedi who have significant numbers on their side. Our second topic of the day, why couldn't Darth Maul blink in episode 1? I mean, we see him do it so many times throughout the Clone Wars, so obviously it's not a thing with his species, that being Dathomirian Zabraks. No, instead it's because the stuntman, Ray Park, who portrayed Maul here, had to wear contacts to give off the illusion of Sith eyes, but it turns out they were actually extremely uncomfortable for the actor and made it painful to blink. So technically he does blink when looking up at first when the door opens. Also, his eyes close when getting kicked by Kenobi in this one scene. We really see it right here when he gets bisected in half, which is kind of cool and almost gives off the feeling that maybe it was intentional to have him in control the whole time with unwavering focus on the task at hand, literally until he is no longer in control and then loses his focus and power, shown by a notion as simple as the blinking. Now, I could actually find out about whether or not this was done on purpose, but if so, it really shows how the small details can change a scene. Next up, what were the early versions of Darth Maul? As in, how come he at one point had feathers on his head, whereas in an early draft Maul is downright nightmare fuel? Okay, so George Lucas had described Darth Maul as a figure from your worst nightmare to the designer Ian McCaig, and then they thus offered Lucas a design based on a nightmare of his, which was rejected but later inspired the Night Sister Sith Witch. With this one, he'd based it off of a dream of his where he'd see a mysterious, dead yet alive figure with their face pressed up to the window during a thunderstorm as rain streamed down, but instead they'd have a female Sith with red locks covering their face to replace the rain and also show metal teeth. George responded with, "Okay, now draw me your second worst nightmare." Ian McCaig spent many of the 3 years working on the Darth Maul design with masks in the style of Darth Vader from A New Hope, attempting to do something similar to the designs of Ralph McQuarrie in the 70s. However, he didn't feel he was on the right track, probably didn't want to pull a Kylo Ren and just do the same thing all over again, and instead prompted to go in a new direction with more alien and physical anatomy designs. One day, McCaig was trying to make Sith Lord versions of the art department crew crew at Lucasfilm, and drew David Dozoretz, head of the animations group, with a circuit board on his face. Lucas got intrigued by the circuit board idea, and McCaig started producing similar caricatures. After getting frustrated with a drawing of production designer Gavin Bouquet, McCaig started covering it in tape. He liked the result, describing it as a kind of Rorschach pattern, and so did Lucas. The final drawing had McCaig's own face with a pattern based on 3 things: a concept of a flayed flesh face painting of African tribes, and further Rorschach experimentation. Dropping ink onto the paper, folding it in half, and then opening it again. In case you aren't familiar, Rorschach patterns are when they drop the ink on paper in random forms, and some people see different things in them, like Dante's Inferno if you happen to be insane. And I remember that from my 8th grade English teacher, so thanks for the info, Miss Cosby. Darth Maul's head originally had feathers to soften the look of the character based on prayer totems, but the creature effects crew, led by Nick Dudman, interpreted those feathers as horns. Honestly, I'm glad, because this intense, almost satanic look for Maul has always made him very morbid and deathly on screen as a design, adding something to this film. However, with those feathers, Ian's idea was to show his Sith focus by having Maul braid up the feathers behind his head in that earlier version of him with piano wire, and that the feathers basically had to end at the right points. Another change to the design was his clothing, from a tight bodysuit with a muscle pattern to the Sith robe based on samurai plates, because the lightsaber battles involved so much jumping and spinning. It's also said that this muscle suit would have included Batman style spikes on its arms, which is interesting to think of how this early version of Maul could have looked, but I really think his Sith robes look really good here and make him actually very agile and able to move around and stuff, which I kind of prefer when I feel like so many movies have these big bulky villains and heroes, but it's kind of cool to see someone that can actually do flips and be acrobatic. Reusing the info I gathered for the 5th video I ever uploaded to this channel, we have the time Darth Maul and Cad Bane interacted and even went on a mission together, which I find very cool as they're both in my top 10 Star Wars characters personally. So to start off the story of how Darth Maul and Cad Bane worked together, before the Battle of Naboo, Darth Maul was actually looking for a Jedi to kill when he discovered that Zev Zrexis, a crime boss, was holding an auction for a young Jedi apprentice. Cad Bane actually helped save Maul from an encounter with some drunk thugs on Nar Shaddaa, and then Aurra Sing voices her doubts about the Sith to Cad Bane, but he says that the credits are worth it. They then went to the auction, and Cad Bane, alongside bounty hunters Aurra Sing, True Trill Tech, and Vorhildo, as well as Darth Maul, captured the Jedi and stole a Shek Kalesh class freighter gunship after killing the Mugans aboard. They then fly away from the auction complex, but Zev Zrexis plants a bomb in their ship that makes them crash on the moon of Draskel. Zev Zrexis then tells the auctioneers that there is now a hunt to kill the Jedi and bounty hunters that hold her. Cad Bane remarks to Maul that he should now receive hazard pay for the situation they are in. Maul and the bounty hunters split up. Maul draws most of their hunters away and then duels with the Jedi Padawan. After a long fight, he kills her, but Cad Bane and the other bounty hunters fight off against a group of Trandoshans by working together. Aurra Sing steals a weak-way ship after killing the crew on board, and after throwing some smoke grenades at the Trandoshans, Cad Bane jumps on board. They then rescue Maul from the remaining hunters, and Maul pays Cad in credits and then kills Zev Zrexis, who orchestrated that whole fiasco. Anyway, here Maul would start a fake cartel under the name of Katis and would work with the Force-sensitive Zek Puro to hunt amongst the underworld to intercept Skarn, a substance used to manufacture spice through shipments. The odd pair of two bested some of their direct buyers and then acquired the Skarn. However, Darth Maul would shove a sharp chunk of metal into the chest of this guy, that being Zek, killing him and showing that Maul always works alone. Except for when his brother saves him. One of Maul's earliest missions was the assassination of Silo or Monka. One of the greatest living Jedi warriors, Monka had since gone into seclusion, renouncing the lightsaber to concentrate on what he felt was a purer technique. After fighting him, rather than accept death, the punishment for failure, Maul resolved to best Monka. Knowing that Monka was much faster than himself, Maul determined to outsmart the Jedi Master, get in close and attack. He proceeded to create a new lightsaber based upon Sith schematics which he had originally received from Darth Sidious and inspired by the Zaboka, a traditional weapon of his species. Fabricating two lightsabers, Maul wielded them together, pommel to pommel, creating a double-bladed lightsaber, and that's how that was made, in case you were ever wondering. Star Wars Visionaries is a comic book that was created, or more specifically a graphic novel, from the early 2000s that I'll be looking at really quickly, as it has a really cool story about how Obi-Wan fights Darth Maul on Tatooine in this sort of Legends continuity. So Kenobi and Maul engaged in a furious rematch. Kenobi managed to gain the upper hand when he severed Maul's right arm, cutting the Darksider's weapon in two pieces in the process, as well as breaking several of Maul's horns with his bare hand. Maul summoned the remaining half of his weapon and turned to face Kenobi, only to find himself facing the Jedi's lightsaber emitter. Kenobi hesitated to execute his helpless opponent, but had the decision taken out of his hands when the revived Owen, who had been knocked out earlier, killed Maul with his damaged rifle. Obi-Wan said he would take the body and burn it in the Dune Sea. Owen told Kenobi that Luke would be safer if Kenobi never returned. Obi-Wan departed with Maul's corpse, speaking to Luke through the Force, assuring him that he would always be present, if not in person, then in spirit. And it is cool that this is actually where the Clone Wars design of Maul came from, which I find really awesome, as that is my favorite look that Maul has ever had, at least in my opinion.
I am surprised you could have forgotten me so easily.
Next up we have a story from Legends where Maul and Vader actually fought, where it basically got a revived Darth Maul, and this was before they really knew what was going on, and it's from the book Star Wars Tales as well.
Darth Maul and Vader are two of the most powerful Sith to ever exist, but did you know they fought long after the rise of the Empire? An Imperial shuttle lands in a desolate volcanic planet, and stormtroopers stand at attention on both flanks of the entrance as Lord Vader descends. The Death Star plans were said to be in this planet, and Vader was eager to end the rebellion once and for all. But Vader began to feel a presence he hadn't felt in a long time. He asked two stormtroopers to accompany him, while the rest would fan out into the surrounding areas. The stormtroopers chatted in speculation, but suddenly one of the stormtroopers was quickly decapitated. They shot at the cloaked figure in great panic, but every shot was deflected or dodged. The figure would come in and out of vision like a fleeting shadow. Soon, a lone stormtrooper would be left alive, until he too was suddenly struck with a red flash. Meanwhile, Vader entered the chasms while his stormtroopers talked about the planet's connection to the dark side. While they were conversing, one of the stormtroopers suddenly starts choking. The other trooper pleaded to Vader for his comrade's life, but Vader said that it wasn't him doing it. He stood there until both troopers were slowly force-choked to death by an unknown entity. He ignited his crimson saber as three hooded figures emerged from the darkness. They had explained how this was a trap from the very beginning, and how Vader was unworthy to be a Sith apprentice. They claimed that he was still Anakin Skywalker within, while Vader denied this by telling them that Anakin was dead. Just as Vader was about to strike down the three figures, he was suddenly blocked by a familiar face, Darth Maul. The figures explained to him that Maul's clone will be the one to replace him as Sidious's apprentice. Vader strode towards Maul, saber in hand. The clone expertly blocked and kicked Vader. The Maul clone explained how he was pure hatred, while he could still sense the lingering light within Vader. Vader would then attempt to use one of the stormtroopers' blasters to shoot Maul using the Force, but Maul would block the shots. Vader would taunt the clone, calling him an imposter, but the clone rebuts by telling Vader that he hides behind the mask to mask his unworthiness. The fight continues with Maul's clone having the upper hand. His acrobatics and speed catches Vader off guard, and they would end up on a rock platform surrounded by lava. The clone would continue degrading him, asking if a machine can truly hate and use the dark side. Vader would eventually catch him off guard and snap his lightsaber in two. But the clone simply used the two sabers separately and eventually striked Vader across his helmet. Vader laid on the rocky ground reaching for his saber. Maul would triumphantly say that Vader's hate was not enough to save him. But using the Force, Vader would grasp his saber, point it towards his own torso, and ignite it, going through both him and the clones' bodies. Before his death, the Maul clone would ask Vader what he could hate enough to defeat him. Vader simply answered, himself.
And it is also worth noting that we would have basically seen this in canon as well, in a specific Star Wars Rebels episode. The first big character we had coming back was actually before Disney in the George Lucas era, that, as you can see, being Darth Maul, who was quote-unquote killed in episode 1, but is found again by his brother Savage in the Clone Wars. Now I want to explore two things here. One, did audiences truly believe he was dead for those 12 years that followed 1999? And two, why is it that this revival has never bothered me or other fans for the most part? Well, starting with the first bit, as to whether or not Darth Maul was supposed to die here originally, it is true that George Lucas wanted him to die in The Phantom Menace originally to create this shocking moment, and because he didn't play a much bigger role in the trilogy outside of this. So it does seem that the fandom would have been led to believe that he was dead until the decision to bring him back was made while creating the Clone Wars, because Lucas apparently always regretted killing him off so quickly, as he had other plans for the character. Now, probably a better way to go about this research is to just ask you guys in the audience that happen to be a little bit older, because I mean the fandom that led you to believe otherwise. But at one point George even had plans for his own sequel trilogy to have Maul and Talon as the main Sith. In case you don't know, Darth Talon is a Legends character that lived in universe after the time of the Galactic Civil War. And I feel like the reason this always works is because of how Darth Maul really lost everything after this lightsaber fight. His legs, his mind, and his role in the Sith Order under Sidious. So while he doesn't die here, he loses enough to the point that it's still impactful and he's practically died. Also, this type of moment still works as a shocking twist where the villain of the movie is cut in half and falls down a deep pit. Don't forget, it also helps how awesome he was in the Clone Wars and what Sam Witwer provided for expanding his character. Although, I will say I do get kind of tired of people hating on episode 1 Maul for being a flat character that they didn't care about, because in The Phantom Menace, Maul is actually supposed to be more of a physical threat that embodies evil and power. Also, he's just so cool in that movie, I can't even with those people. Now, and for our next section, I'll be explaining the question of how did Maul stop using the Mandalorian Darksaber. So after Maul lured Kenobi back to Mandalore, Maul used the Darksaber to kill Duchess Satine in front of Kenobi as part of his revenge against the Jedi Master. After Kenobi made his escape thanks to Bo-Katan, Maul and Opress were confronted by Maul's former master, Darth Sidious, who came to eliminate his former apprentice before he grew even more powerful. Together, Maul and Opress fought Sidious, but they were no match against the Sith Lord, and after Opress was killed, Maul drew the Darksaber and wielded it in tandem with his red blade against his former master, but was unable to defeat him. Sidious tossed aside the Darksaber as he subdued and tortured Maul with Force Lightning. As his former apprentice begged for mercy, Sidious simply replied that there was no mercy as he continued to torture him. Prime Minister Almec and the Mandalorian Super Commandos recover the Darksaber following Maul's capture by Sidious. After being freed from the prison known as the Spire by Gar Saxon and Rook Kast, Maul reclaimed the Darksaber and used the weapon against General Grievous's forces and Magna Guards, where they came to the Zanbar to attack their base. After Maul returned to Dathomir to help Mother Talzin regain her physical form, Maul was confronted by Sidious and Grievous at the Night Brothers village. He, along with Talzin, who had possessed Dooku, fought Sidious and Grievous. Maul used the Darksaber in the battle until he and Talzin were overwhelmed. He fled the battle as Talzin sacrificed herself and was killed by Grievous. The Darksaber was still in Dathomir during the reign of the Galactic Empire, kept by Maul in the Night Sister lair. Sabine Wren used it against Ezra Bridger while she was possessed by Night Sister spirit. Ezra used his lightsaber and the Darksaber to destroy the altar from which the spirits rose. Sabine then picked up the Darksaber as she, Ezra, and Kanan Jarrus left the planet. Upon their return to their base on the planet Atollon, Sabine gave the lightsaber to Kanan for safekeeping because she was hesitant to use it herself. So there will be a little bit of overlapping with what I just mentioned, and as I go into the Son of Dathomir comics, so sorry about that, but I thought that was kind of interesting just so that you remember how he lost the Darksaber in case you forgot. And also, really quickly, I just wanted to mention that when working on Solo, it is really cool that Ray Park and Sam Witwer would have actually been in the same room working together and stuff. I don't know why, but I might be starting to go crazy after talking about Darth Maul for so much and working on this video for so long, but it starts to seem really cool that these two guys actually got to work together at some point and be in the same space, which is just, I don't know, a little bit of a nice fact. Let's now look over the 2014 Dark Horse Comics Son of Dathomir run, which features Maul fighting against Grievous, as well as Dooku being infected by the spirits of Mother Talzin and then fighting Sidious while being possessed. And it is important to note that this is canon, which confused me at first because when I was looking on Wikipedia, it was also in the Legends section as well, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, it is a canon comic ultimately, because while it was a Dark Horse comic, it also came out during the Disney reign, and does not have a Legends label on it, so therefore it is technically canon. After Darth Sidious decided Maul and ultimately Savage Opress as well were growing too powerful in the background of the Clone Wars, he decided to cut the snake off at its head and destroy the leadership of the new Shadow Collective. After fighting Maul and Savage, Palpatine would end the life of Savage Opress before defeating Maul and promising to keep him alive. As in secret, he needed to lure out Mother Talzin to defeat her once and for all. After the duel on Mandalore, Sidious took Palpatine as his prisoner and brought him to the remote world of Stygian Prime, where the Confederacy of Independent Systems operated the Spire, which is basically a prison fortress in the mountains. On Olmec's orders, Sidious's vessel was pursued by Maul's Death Watch forces with the intention of rescuing their captive leader. Once he was imprisoned, Maul was subjugated to torture at the hands of the Sith. As Sidious reminded Maul that he still had plans for his former apprentice, the two were interrupted by Count Dooku, whose arrival angered Maul. And yeah, we get to see this panel where it's like Maul having all these needles inside of him, which is like that one kind of thing that I forgot what it's called, but yeah. Dooku returned to Maul after conferring with Sidious with orders from the Dark Lord to learn more about the Shadow Collective and the names of Maul's associates. Dooku interrogated his predecessor, electrifying him in an attempt to find the information he was seeking. Maul resisted the torture and refused to give up any information, but after Dooku left, Rook, Cast, and Gar Saxon of Death Watch attacked the prison and rescued their captive leader. Which, not gonna lie, you'd expect the prison of someone like Palpatine would maybe be a little more secure than, just being able to bust in as a Mandalorian and take Darth Maul out, but don't worry because Darth Maul didn't win in the end anyway, so who got the last laugh, I suppose, is what we should be asking. And the Mandalorians blew a hole in the walls of Maul's cell, and together they rappelled down the mountain and escaped aboard a Death Watch ship. Unknown to Maul and the Death Watch, the Sith intended for Maul to escape so he could lead them to Mother Talzin. So it turns out what I said 5 seconds ago literally would have been answered if I had read a sentence further. Maul and Death Watch regrouped with more of their forces on Zanbar. After his arrival, Maul spoke to Prime Minister Olmec via hologram, and the Prime Minister told Maul that the prison break was repayment for when Maul released Olmec from imprisonment, which was of course in Season 5 of the Clone Wars, after in Season 3 he was arrested for the corruption that he allowed to take place on Mandalore. Once again in command of his forces, Maul reclaimed his Darksaber and promised the Mandalorians that the war they had longed for was at hand. Soon thereafter, Separatist forces under the command of General Grievous reached Zanbar. Grievous launched all of his forces against the Death Watch, with both sides suffering heavy losses. During the battle, Maul destroyed 4 of Grievous's Magna Guard droids and attacked Grievous himself. Despite Maul's obvious power, Grievous sent him back with a kick during their blade lock. With most of his forces in ruins, Maul ordered his warriors to retreat. Grievous allowed Maul to escape per Dooku's orders, hoping that Maul would seek out Mother Talzin for help. And it is cool that we get to see Darth Maul versus Grievous here, as that is surely a question that many of you have asked before, including those on YouTube, as we can see here, and it finally is sort of answered. That we'll see in a second. As Dooku predicted, Maul contacted Mother Talzin after leading Zanbar, calling out to her through the Force for guidance. She appeared to him from afar in a cloud of smoke, and he informed her of his escape from prison and defeat on Zanbar. Talzin anticipated that Sidious hopes to lure her into a trap, so she ordered Maul to go to Ord Mantell, where the Black Sun had a base of operations. Once there, Talzin wanted him to gather his forces for another battle against the Separatists, this time to lure Dooku and Grievous into a trap and capture them, which Talzin believed that Sidious would not expect. Talzin herself would not go to Ord Mantell, as she knew she was a target of the Sith Lords. Maul arrived on Ord Mantell and conferred with his Shadow Collective allies, including Zaitan Maj of Black Sun and Fife of the Pike Syndicate. He informed them that a battle would take place against the Separatists, who were being lured to Ord Mantell, thinking they could capture Maul. Despite some reservations from his allies, Maul was confident that his plan would succeed and they could trap the two Separatist leaders. Maul and his allies quickly planned their attack against the Separatists, which include luring the Droid army to a specific point in the Black Sun-controlled territory so that the Shadow Collective forces could attack them. As the Collective prepared for battle, a team of Knight Brother warriors, led by Brother Viscus, arrived after having been sent from Dathomir by Mother Talzin to reinforce Maul's army. While Maul greeted his fellow Knight brothers, the Separatists arrived in orbit and attacked, using their fleet to bombard the surface of Ord Mantell. Maul immediately ordered his forces to carry out their assault, while the Knight brothers were to wait in command center for instructions. Maul, meanwhile, made his way to Mandalorian warships, which he and Death Watch forces would use to assault the Separatist fleet in orbit. So it is kind of interesting here. I find this comic run to be very cool, actually, and would love to read the actual books with the panels and everything. But it is kind of interesting that Sidious captured Maul, and then it's basically just right back to wars between the Shadow Collective and the Separatists again, basically kind of furthering Maul's plans in the Clone Wars, even though it seems like he pretty much got defeated here and had everything over, but he always manages to return, as we've seen time and time again. Maul arrived in orbit, while the Separatists began landing their troops, as well as Count Dooku, on the planet, quickly overwhelming the Shadow Collective army. Maul's ships attacked Grievous's command vessel before attaching itself to the hull of the Separatist ship, so Maul and his forces could board and make their way to the bridge. Once there, Maul and Death Watch eliminated the battle droids, defending the cyborg general, and Maul then subdued Grievous and gave him a choice: disable the signal powering the droids on the surface, or die. Grievous begrudgingly disabled the signal and was taken into custody, which, not gonna lie, feels like they go so far in Grievous being a coward, but at least in a case like this, I feel like they should have made him a little bit more intimidating and less cowardly, but oh well. Dooku, who engaged and killed the Knight brothers in battle, was captured by Shadow Collective forces on the surface, while the disabled battle droids were eliminated. After the battle, Maul contacted Mother Talzin once again to inform her of what had happened on Ord Mantell. Talzin had promised Maul that with Dooku and Grievous in custody, they would capture Sidious as well and gain their revenge against him. Maul and his forces cleared off Ord Mantell, leaving little trace that they were there, so that Sidious wouldn't come looking for them later, and made their way to Vizsla Keep 09, a Mandalorian supply outpost. From the outpost, Maul contacted Darth Sidious, informing him of the capture of Dooku and General Grievous. Claiming that he had no further use for the two, Sidious told Maul to kill them, but the former Sith Lord had other plans. Grievous was locked in the brig, while Maul tempted Dooku to join him. And that could have been really cool to see Darth Maul and Dooku working together, maybe even a potential what-if of the future, but they were both betrayed by Sidious, so Maul suggested that he and Dooku could be natural allies. I mean, think about it, Sidious basically just told Dooku that he had no use for him whatsoever, and that is something that Dooku probably should have realized earlier. Dooku did not believe that Sidious could be challenged, and claimed he did not think he should ally with Maul and Mother Talzin, the latter of whom once tried to kill Dooku in the Clone Wars series, of course. Talzin appeared herself using Night's sister magic and told the story of how she was once an ally of Sidious, how she too was betrayed when Sidious took Maul from her, and how Sidious was already seeking to replace the Count. With Maul being taken away, that's actually something we're going to be covering later in the video, so make sure you stick around for that. Neither Talzin nor Maul believed Dooku would sincerely ally with them, and simply wanted to ensure he could be taken to Dathomir. As they spoke, a Jedi-led Republic assault team attacked the supply outpost. The Jedi, including Kenobi, Aayla Secura, Mace Windu, and Tipley, had tracked the Shadow Collective from Ord Mantell. With both of their lives at stake, Dooku feigned an alliance with Maul, while Grievous escaped in the chaos using an escape pod. Maul and Dooku engaged the Jedi in a lightsaber duel, which lasted until Kost shot a small explosive towards the Jedi, incapacitating the Jedi and allowing Maul and Dooku to escape. So about what I said about Maul and Dooku teaming up earlier, it seems that we did pretty much get that here when they fought off against a bunch of Jedi, and also it's interesting that Mace Windu kind of did fight off against Dooku in this part of the comic, which is even more cool when you realize that I have a video about Dooku versus Mace Windu, which will be coming out and will be my most highly produced, highly anticipated video to date, as it is much more of a different concept and the production on it will be very high. Having fled the outpost, Maul and his followers made their way towards Dathomir. While en route, Maul was contacted by Maj and the Pikes, who grew concerned that Maul's vendetta was causing the Shadow Collective's plans to fail. Maul assured them that they would be paid and that Sidious as well would die so that they could get their revenge, allowing the galaxy to be controlled by the Shadow Collective. To ensure loyalty, Maul ordered Saxon to keep the Pikes and Black Sun in line. He also revealed to Dooku that he knew the Sith Lord was not an ally, and that Sidious had ordered his apprentice to feign alliance. Once on Dathomir, Maul was greeted by Brother Viscus, who survived his fight with Dooku on Ord Mantell. The Night Brother told Maul that they were ready for the next step of their plan, so Dooku was taken before Mother Talzin, who appeared before them in a cloud of smoke. She unleashed her magic upon the Sith Lord, using it to draw Dooku's life force so she could physically manifest herself again. Talzin's physical return required a sacrifice, and they had chosen Dooku for that purpose. They were interrupted by an explosion ripping through the area and the arrival of General Grievous and Sidious. Sidious reminded his former apprentice that there was only one plan that mattered, Sidious's. The arrival of the Dark Lord and Cybernetic General led to a lightsaber duel, one which Talzin joined after she took control of Count Dooku's body. Talzin fought Sidious, while Maul fought the Cyborg General, and Sidious quickly gained the advantage over the Dathomir Witch. Sidious bombarded Talzin with Force Lightning, and the Witch released Dooku and appeared in physical form once more. Maul, meanwhile, force-pushed Grievous out of the opening that the explosion had created. Once Sidious attacked her with a barrage of lightning, Maul pleaded with his mother to use his own life force to draw more powerful, but Talzin demanded that he retreat as she held off the Dark Lord's attacks. The witch used her powers to toss Maul from the fray, and he was dragged away by Kost and another Death Watch warrior. As they fled, Maul watched as Grievous returned to fatally stab Talzin with his lightsabers. So, I don't think Grievous would be too happy with Maul after this, or actually more specifically the other way around, with Maul probably always holding a grudge against not only the Jedi, but Grievous as well now, who is basically Palpatine's new apprentice. Our next question is, of course, how did Maul get his tattoos? Well, in canon, Maul was born in 54 BBY as the son of Mother Talzin on Dathomir, and all we really know is that he was given these tattoos as an infant before his first birthday from Mother Talzin, which I don't know about you, but I find that to be quite brutal, but also sick at the same time. It's noted that Dathomiri tattoos were meant to indicate tribal heritage, and not just this, but also the male Zabraks had natural striping on their bodies, as well as these additions of sorts. The actual tattoo part of the markings was made from boiling mooshling pods, which created a yellow paste that could then be mixed from ash and clay to make different colors, like the most commonly used amongst them, that being black. He was of course a Dathomirian male, and therefore a knight's brother, being specifically a blood sibling to Savage and Pharaoh, while he would later be deemed the name Maul by Darth Sidious. He didn't actually know them here. He was actually given a different name here, one shrouded in mystery, as Maul would one day talk about his old name and how he had long since forgotten it. This is probably in parts due to the fact that Sidious would take Maul away at a young age, and he would be thrown into a pit with a knight's brother who wouldn't allow him to say goodbye to his mother. For the next months, he was put through domestic abuse orchestrated by Sidious as a test to mold the mind of the young Dathomirian into that of a killer. It would seem to work, as Maul would start to harbor feelings of hatred and resentment towards his mother for abandoning him, feelings of hatred which would turn him to the dark side as time passed. And of course, through the dark side, you're open to doing anything that gains you power and success, so killing one person here is really not that far out of line. Maul would force choke the two sons of his knight brother Keeper, who he was led to believe were his brothers, and also the Keeper himself in front of Palpatine and Talzin after a burst of anger, which would please Sidious and ensure the boy as his apprentice. Maul would train with the Master through relentless trial and tribulation, proving himself eventually after killing the Twi'lek Jedi whom he had mentioned earlier, as well as one day killing Qui-Gon Jinn and scarring Obi-Wan for life in the process. In Legends, however, as is usually the case, we get much more of an interesting to how he acquired the tats. You see, rather than being Dathomirian and tied to a species in Legends, they were actually Sith tattoos applied by Sidious himself. The story goes that by birth, Maul was Knight's brother, a member of a clan of Zabraks, who like the rest of his brethren, was subjugated to an initiation ceremony where he was immersed in a magic, oily bath before then being covered in a full body red tattoo, as well as similar dark markings applied to the rest of his body, as keep in mind in Legends, the Dathomirians were half human, half Zabrak, with Maul's mother specifically being human here. His Legends mom is also not Mother Talzin, but once Palpatine took him away, the original black markings were also taken away from him, turning him back to his pure red look of before, until, as I just mentioned, Sidious would add his own Sith tattoos to his body personally. It is also important to note that the process of applying these Sith tattoos was agonizing and was done in an attempt to cleanse the mind of the servant and also test the complete devotion and dedication to the dark side. And to give a quick summary of his Legends origins as well, now that we've talked about his tattoos here, Maul spent the first few years of his life in the care of droids, TD, D9 in particular, in a secret location on Mustafar, the Lava Planet. A year after Maul was given over to the Sith, Sidious was granted permission by his own master to train him as an apprentice. Plagueis, however, instructed Sidious not to be the Dathomirian. Maul was to be trained as a Sith assassin, not a Sith Lord like Plagueis and Sidious. During his training, Maul did not know the human who served as his master. He only referred to him as Master Sidious, which he had no idea that he was going to be taught by a Dark Lord of the Sith. Maul was technically a violation of the Rule of Two, because his own master was at the time apprenticed to another, the Moon Sith Lord Darth Plagueis. Plagueis, however, was fully aware of Maul's existence and supported Sidious's decision to train him. The primary reason for Plagueis' support, despite the violation of the Rule of Two, was that Maul was trained to be expendable. As an assassin, he could perform high-priority, boots-on-the-ground missions for the Sith without running the risk of exposing either Plagueis or Sidious should he fail. In 33 BBY, Sidious gave Maul his first mission to put the criminal organization Black Sun in disarray. Maul carried out this task perfectly, dealing the group a grievous blow. And hey, If you really need to Maul, you should take some tips from Savage, who was the first person I ever made a video about, as Savage, as it would seem, does seem to have captions now, which make it very easy for people to watch. And does what we mentioned about his Legends tattoo ceremony indicate that all of Maul's skin in Legends is fake, that in fact he really has human skin under all there? Well, that's not a set in stone answer, but if his mother is indeed the human Knight's sister, which Seekina, then I'd say there's a chance he has either a skin color appearance or that of a mixed race similar to humans Twi'lek hybrids, like the children of the clone deserter Kut Lawquane Jed and Shai Lawquane. Even more cool than Darth Maul's tattoos are the extended dialogue I mentioned before in a short on the channel, part of which appears in one of the teasers for the movie here in this clip.
Fear attracts the fearful, the strong, the weak, the innocent, the corrupt. Fear is my ally.
Also though, it turns out there's even more expansive stuff than all that. In the actual dialogue in the film, Darth Maul has 3 lines of dialogue, 2 during his scene walking with Palpatine on Coruscant at night, which is actually the first time we see him in the flesh, ignoring the hologram scene from earlier of course, where he says this line,
Tatooine is sparsely populated. If the trace was correct, I will find them quickly, Master.
As well as the one here after Sidious talks some more.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
His third and final line is when he's talking to Palpatine's hologram while in the Theed Palace in the throne room before the Battle of Naboo.
Yes, my master.
In this film, while he was physically portrayed by Ray Park, his voice work was done by Peter Serafinowicz, probably due to George favoring a more mysterious and smooth voice. Maul makes some audible grunts and gasps during his fights with the Jedi at the end, like here when he is getting cut in half by Obi-Wan. However, Maul was actually going to get extended dialogue, especially during the final lightsaber fight scene when battling Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. During the part when Obi-Wan faces off alone against Maul, the Jedi would comment on how much Maul was using an old style, which would lead to Maul replying that Obi-Wan had learned to parry it fast. Then after saying that Maul didn't bother to learn anything, he would reply that he doesn't have to. If what I just said doesn't make much sense, it's simply because the way I read it was off of Wikipedia, which was done in a very confusing manner that I didn't understand, but I did the best I could to translate it over to you all. Obi-Wan was also going to tell Maul right after striking him down, learn not, live not, which was a teaching of Qui-Gon, and quite possibly also a teaching of Qui-Gon which might have shown up at some point in the movie earlier. So overall, I actually do believe a more wordy scene here could have amped it up a bit, but definitely nothing like Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku, as those are characters with pre-established relationships, and also Dooku is more of a talker than the sheer brute strength and prowess that is Maul. So yeah, I don't know, I feel like this could have been a cool scene. I'm just interested to see what it'd look like to see Maul talking here. Like I said, I don't really know what he would be talking about, but they seem to have already found a way to work around that, with him talking about their fighting styles and how arrogant some of them are, which kind of establishes Maul's moment of arrogance, which he sure is going to commit in a second. Our next topic is Darth Maul Satanic. Well, as most Westerners associate Satan as being their worst fear, the fear of eternal suffering, and the common image of red skin with horns being there in their minds, unfortunately, it makes sense that with the image of Maul, such imagery would be present. However, even with that said though, Lucas has actually put Palpatine, of all people, to be the equivalent of Satan in the Star Wars story, meaning that perhaps Maul as an extension of Sidious could be thought of as his physical embodiment of such ideas. Also, there are many other physical patterns in Maul's appearance to add to this image of fear, which George Lucas was going for. One is the patterns of tattoos or markings on Maul's face, which are identical to muscle patterns of humans, whereas another is other images of death and pain and suffering throughout his body. Such examples include a snake's tongue moving under his mouth, which is commonly associated with death and poison. Another is the glaring eyes of a predator in the wild, a representation of fear and danger. Also, eyes with repulsive pupils giving feelings of sickness and lack of sleep. Lastly is the teeth, which could easily be seen as representing decay. Ultimately, it doesn't seem, based off of what we know from behind the scenes, that George wanted Maul to, at least story-wise, represent Satan, but it makes sense actually that this appearance was suitable to convey fear to Westerners as a whole, and also as even an extension of Palpatine, who is truly the embodiment of this according to Lucas. And for Christians, I'd say it's important to understand that it's still okay to think Maul is a cool character, as it is a fictional work and not intended to represent support for Satan in any way, shape, or form, so I'd say it's all good. And real quick, we're gonna switch over to me from a month ago, as I explained to you how Darth Maul truly did survive getting cut in half. Did you know this 2012 comic shows the grueling process of how Maul not only survived falling down a massive reactor shaft, but also survived basically drowning for days, and we see one of the main reasons he was able to survive in Legends and canon also, that being from his Zabrak anatomy, which has 2 hearts, able to pump blood across the body very quickly. Today I'll be reading from the canon and then arguably more interesting Legends Wikipedia article as to every event that happened to Maul right after the Phantom Menace, which led to his fall to insanity. Through his hate and rage, Maul managed to survive being cut in half as his top half fell down the reactor shaft and into a trash container. A combination of Night Sister magics, Dathomirian physiology, and Sith tenacity served to keep him alive and tethered him to life even as his sanity began to leave him. Maul's shattered body was dumped on the junkyard world of Lotho Minor, where he lived in the bowels of the planet. There he utilized discarded metal to fashion for himself a 6-limbed apparatus that allowed him to walk again. During Maul's exile, the droid Captain Spike Wheel forced several people, including Grits, Ricky, Brenar, and Celeste, to spend a night on Lotho Minor in order to join her crew. When they first got on the planet, a confrontation broke out between Grits and Brenar, and the ground gave way into a labyrinth. While exploring, Celeste got separated from the group, and Brenar went looking for him. Brenar then found out that Maul had captured Celeste. Maul, while muttering to himself, threw Celeste at Brenar and proceeded to chase them through the labyrinth. They eventually ran into a dead end, and Maul was able to kill them when Grits captured Maul with an electro net. They then traveled back to the surface, and Maul in tow, to find Spike Wheel waiting for him. Grits and Spike Wheel then revealed that they had been hired to find and capture Maul, and that it was simply a test for Grits to become first mate. Grits and Spike Wheel, while listening to the message from the person that hired them, realized that the message was from Maul himself. Maul then escaped from his electro net and confirmed that it was him who sent the message because he needed a ship to escape. Spike Wheel then attempted to shoot Maul, but the fallen Sith destroyed her. Celeste panicked and attempted to grab the controls to the ship, which shot the ship straight into the sky. Ricky opened the door to the ship, and Maul and Grits fell back to the surface of Lotho Minor. They left the planet, and Maul killed Grits. During his exile, he made a bargain with a sentient, sneaky Anacondan named Morley, who agreed to bring Maul food in return for his leftovers. Over the years, Maul was driven mad with rage and despair, but remained driven by thoughts of revenge against Kenobi. During those years, Anakin Skywalker, while training in lightsaber combat at the Jedi Temple, altered a training droid, giving it Darth Maul's appearance. Incredibly, when we go to Legends, Maul managed to survive his defeat at the hands of Kenobi, through his seething hate, augmented by his indomitable will to live. Maul reached out with the Force and grabbed hold of an air vent to break his plunge into the shaft's darkness. He continued his fall down the reactor shaft, landing in water. Eventually his still conscious, though cauterized upper body was dumped into a container and taken to Lotho Minor. As he lay submerged, Maul fell at last into unconsciousness, cursing Kenobi. According to Darth Sidious, who learned of the Sith Jedi battle from Kenobi himself, while cloaked in his public persona of a newly elected Chancellor Palpatine, his prideful apprentice was defeated by his belief in his own invincibility. With Maul's knowledge of his enemy's his plan, the Zabrak's failure was that he should have prevented the starships from taking off to destroy the orbital droid control ship before facing the Jedi, but his vanity and arrogance won him over, only to defeat him. His focus was only on the Jedi. As far as Kenobi was concerned, Maul could have ended it quickly if he hadn't paused to gloat, kicking the Jedi's lightsaber contemptuously into the pit, pacing and snarling before him in arrogant, premature triumph. Hesitating to savor revenge, whether of a personal or collective nature, was his failing. If Maul found he was not able to dispatch the Jedi quickly, he should have turned his focus to dealing with the Queen, who, having survived the conflict, is another failure. Even so, Maul's failures were mental miscalculations, not physical ones, and Sidious's apprentice, however, in laying bare his matchless prowess and skill, did instill fear into the Jedi that the Sith had returned. Maul did succeed in defeating Qui-Gon Jinn, a victory, however, that Sidious felt he really must claim for himself. That triumph was, after all, the direct result of his own teaching and the caliber of training Sidious afforded Maul that made that defeat possible in the first place. But going back to Maul, arriving finally at his destination on Lotho Minor, he awoke. He activated his lightsaber and carved his way out of the container, screaming with rage. He struggled to move on through the junkyard world, and soon he encountered insects the size of his arm and managed to crush one with his own left hand before using his teeth to rip its leg off. But as he began eating, the Sith Lord heard a scream coming from his right. A sly and mysterious anacondan named Morley was slithering away in fright from one of the Lotho Minor's gigantic machines, the Fire Breather. Maul threw his lightsaber with the force directly at the Fire Breather's head, piercing it through. The machine instantly fell to the ground, and the fire from its mouth extinguished. His weapon returned to him, and Maul once again blacked out. Morley the Zabrak in his coils and brought him into the caves of the planet, which would eventually become his sanctuary. Maul reawakened and, with all his anger, was able to use the Force to acquire a six-legged arachnid-like cybernetic apparatus to replace his lost lower body. For 12 years, Maul's memories were lost, and he was in a state of near madness, eating only the small animals that came to the cave, aided in obtaining shelter and sustenance only by Morley, but the only thing he remembered was Obi-Wan Kenobi and how he took his legs. Maul's defeat was a setback for Darth Sidious, soaring his triumph over his own master, but not a disaster. Within a year, Maul would be replaced with the former master of the late Jin, Count Dooku. Given the Sith name Darth Tyrannus, Dooku was not only a trained warrior and a duelist, but also a political idealist, exactly the traits Sidious needed to instigate for the Clone Wars. An apparition of Maul later appeared to Kenobi's Padawan Anakin Skywalker in a crystal cave on Ilum, only a few years after the duel on Naboo. When Anakin went into a trance-like state, Darth Maul appeared, and Anakin immediately attacked him. After a furious lightsaber duel in which Maul taunted Anakin about Qui-Gon's death and about the boy's training lightsaber, Anakin won, but as real as he might have looked, this time Maul was merely a creation of the dark side. So I personally find both of those comics to be extremely interesting and extremely cool. By both, I mean the one from Legends. I don't know what I meant by both. There's really only one. But yeah, I mean, as usual, the Legends stuff's a little more interesting, and it is pretty crazy that on top of everything, he did manage to survive drowning as well in this liquid here. But anyway, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you feel like it. You can also become a member, as there are going to be many more members only. For our next entry, our last entry of the video, we're going to go a little bit more retro, with this one covering a creepypasta from the 2003 third-person shooter hack-and-slash game Jedi Academy, that being Star Wars Jedi Academy. And this creepypasta, found on the official creepypasta wiki, or at least one of them, is titled Star Wars Jedi Academy: The Player. In the story, the narrator, who we'll call Glup, was playing on May 28, 2014, 4 days before the servers would shut down permanently for GameSpy and thus the multiplayer for Jedi Academy. In case you don't know, GameSpy was an American provider for online multiplayer and matchmaking middleware for video games, led by Mark Serfas in the year 1990. Reading from the perspective of Glup here, me and my buddies were deciding to give it our all on the game today, as it would probably be our last chance to ever play. We did deathmatch on Tatooine until about halfway through the game, someone with only the username joined the game, which was confusing as I thought my friend Connor had made the match private. After DMing Connor, he said, "Hold on, let me tell the other guys and I'll fix it right up. Thanks for letting me know, bro." Then I was booted back into the main menu and was waiting for Connor to send me an invite to the next server when suddenly messaged me, which was a surprise because I had pretty much forgotten about his existence up until this point. Here's the transcript of the conversation we had. Why? 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 Why what? Why did you abandon me? I then threatened him to stop harassing me and to stop whining, telling him that if he wants to friend me, he can, but I'm playing with my friends right now. However, after getting a friend request from him, seeing his status as playing Jedi Academy, and then getting a invite from him as well, I am inclined to join his game, basically telling my friends, not this time, maybe tomorrow, before joining his server. When loading in, a yellow text and load bar were present, informing me I had to install a custom map. After only 3 to 4 minutes, I choose my custom character, a red Twi'lek with Sith powers, but when I loaded in, my jaw dropped. The map was Korban, except the sky was filled with fire, like the hell level from Doom, and the ground was more red. I loaded into the map in the temple where was as well. His player model struck me as quite odd though. It was Darth Maul, but rather than the normal skin, it was a full red model with longer horns and blood, as well as dust covering his robes. Also, rather than Darth Maul's lightsaber, he wielded a black lightsaber blade similar to the one you unlock in The Force Unleashed. Back on topic, he used Force Rage and Force Scream to deplete my character to 1 health, and once my character had reached 1% of said health, his character chopped her in half. Instead of the usual respawning, however, my character's disembodied state lay on the floor, and I then heard a blood-curdling scream coming from my speakers. I jumped out of my gaming chair and almost hit my head on the roof. I was then booted from the game for being AFK. Looking back on it later, I find the experience strange and creepy and has been suspended from Steam for spamming gore into Steam forums. Occasionally, I look back and wonder what were true motives. Wow, that is 1 hour of Darth Maul lore. Not gonna lie, while recording this one, I had to take like 5 different breaks where I just sat here for a minute because it is genuinely really hard to just read for an hour straight, just Darth Maul lore. Crazy enough. I did find a lot of this interesting, and I really like doing these videos because I can finish them and look back being like, yeah, I actually learned a good bit from that. So let me know, what character do you want me to cover next? Perhaps Sidious, perhaps Grievous, perhaps Mace Windu. I don't know, any of those 3 options is probably who I'm going to do next, as a lot of it does unfortunately just depend on whether I have a thumbnail picture of said character that is good enough to make the video, which is interesting that the whole thing is decided about whether the thumbnail is good or not, but that is how YouTube works. I really hope this video does well. The last one certainly didn't have the best production, but we're going really up in quality on this one, and I'm hoping that we can get some natural growth without any sorts of promotions whatsoever. But thank you for watching, and thank you God for allowing me to make this 1 hour of Darth Maul video. In fact, if you watched this far into the video, I would say that that is very cool.
Down here.
We'll handle this.
We'll take the long way.
What's up, Wheezy?
Show off.
Darth Maul is back, isn't he?
But anyway, thank you so much if you watched this far into the video. I mean, sticking around for 1 hour is pretty crazy and you gotta be really dedicated, so make sure to leave a comment if you did that, and I'll make sure to pin you and, I don't know, maybe do some sort of reward for you, a shout out or something. So make sure to comment down below if you actually did make it this far. And yeah, thanks for sticking around for this long. I hope it wasn't too boring. Tried to go pretty good with the editing on this one, and thanks to any and all people who I collabed with on this video, because as of recording this, I don't even know who I'm going to reach out to yet, but I definitely need some help from some people in order to get this one finished in time. Let me know if you enjoy the 1 hour videos and want to see more of them. Also, we're going to be getting, like I mentioned in this video, a Mace Windu versus Darth Tyrannus video quite soon, so that one should be cool. But anyway, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you want to. I upload multiple videos always on Friday, and I also upload shorts always on Saturday. There's also going to be many different live streams and merch as always, and also there's the members only tab, which you can do because I'm going to be doing some different requests and stuff on there as well, and it would really support me if you enjoy the video and want there to be any way to make it up to me for the, I don't know, entertainment, information, all that good stuff that I have graciously provided for you. But in conclusion, Darth Maul is a character. But in conclusion, Darth Maul is cooler than Darth Vader, and yeah. See ya.